Welcome to Design Build Central, a podcast for design build remodelers by design build remodelers. I'm Bruce Case, one of your hosts.
And I would be Bill Millholland, the other host.
We've got this down pretty good.
Bam.
Wow. We were talking a minute ago. It's been 2.5 years we've been doing this.
We budgeted. We didn't estimate it.
Yes.
Budgeted.
Ooh, that was a good, that was sort of
segue. Hope you guys are paying attention out there.
That was good.
Yeah.
So, just so you all know, obviously you can listen on a podcast. You've hopefully been doing that for approximately 2.5 years. But as of about a month ago, we started to do video. So if you want to see us on video, if you're not already watching us on video, check us out on YouTube. There's 2 ways to get there, right, Bill?
There are actually
which is
2 ways to get
kind of nice. It gives options. So one is through the Qualified Remodeler site for Design Build podcast.
Yep. And the other one is just search for DB Central. And it should pop up.
That's even shorter. I don't have to type out Design Build.
We're simple people around here, Bruce. We try and keep it easy.
And speaking of easy, if you have thoughts, questions, suggestions, we usually get a couple people reaching out to us between episodes with questions, and reach out to DB Central. That's DB Central at casedesign.com. So today we have an exciting topic, estimating. And we have an exciting guest with us, Mr. Dave Exten, who does all of our estimating in the design build side of our business, maintains our estimating systems, and keeps us on the straight and narrow with follow-up of the estimates as well to look at how the estimate's doing versus actual job costs. Dave, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome. Dave spiffed up a little bit, by the way.
Got a haircut.
Looking sharp. Yeah.
That's good.
So Dave, start off with just a little bit about your background so they understand the kind of who you are, but also the kind of personality, the kind of person in our world that does the estimating.
Well, believe it or not, I was brought up more in a restaurant type atmosphere or mom and pop store.
I believe that because I've known you for a while, but
yeah, so I ran that, and then I moved on, and I went into the Army, got a little more organized, and then
you got to tell us the Korea story. Did you buy shoes in Korea?
Yeah. I used to buy $5 Nikes and $5 Adidases back in the mid '80s, which was nice. So moving on from there, I got back into like the delicatessen, right down the street, Bradley Food and Beverage. I ran that for a few years, and then somebody said, "Hey, why don't you get into construction?" And I said, "Okay."
That's all it took?
That's all it took. I didn't know. I didn't know any.
A ballet dancer?
I mean, I knew how to swing a hammer, but that was about it. And use a tape measure, and I said okay, and bought some tools and worked around a few different firms, and then almost 30 years ago, came here.
And maybe share when you came here, you were more in the field.
I was in the field for a couple years.
You didn't run our deli here at Case.
I didn't run the Case Deli. I was in the field for a couple years, and then I went into sales with the original handyman division. What else? I did help George Weisgerber, when he needed it for estimating.
George was sort of the original mad scientist I mean that in a loving, respectful way, not in a negative way at all, but just the creative spirit behind the original estimating system.
Yep. And then full-time estimating, when George retired, I took over.
Amazing. How many estimates do you think you do in a year or month, a year?
Well, I know sales, 200 jobs in sales, but it's probably double that per year, plus different schemes and varieties of options and things like that. So it's a lot.
Ballpark 200 sales, but maybe double that to 400 projects you might be estimating, because not everything sells. Right. And then of that, maybe there's 3. Is that fair? 3 schemes?
3 schemes, 2 to 3.
400 times 3 is 1,200. I just wanted an opportunity to show my math.
I was going to say,
wow. Okay. Don't ask me to get decimals in there.
Luckily, once you do the first scheme, the second scheme's a little easier and a little easier. So,
but can I say shit ton on this, or is that?
We decided last time you can say whatever the heck you want.
That's a shit ton of I think that's fair to cuss a little with that number at 1,200 plus or minus.
That's a lot of.
That's a lot of estimating.
So
yes, it is.
When Bill and I were talking about doing this and having you as a guest, Bill made the good point. Maybe a good place to start beyond your sort of background was, I think different remodelers define estimating and what an estimator in their business may do very differently. Some do this, some do that. Can you just share what you do in a day-to-day basis to get through that many estimates?
Yeah, for me, estimating is just I have drawings, I have a little bit of information about the project that's put on a spreadsheet, and then I start an estimate and I rely off of our database. So if it's a kitchen, I rely on re-roughing a kitchen or a bath, or if it's an addition, we got plenty of line items for every situation we need. But I don't go out and get sub bids, and I don't go out and get material quotes. We solely rely on the estimating system for that.
Do you ever visit jobs?
Never. I went to one job that was going to be an insurance job. This was 10 years ago, and it never went anywhere. And it was right down the street. It wasn't that far away. That's kind of the only reason why I went.
So I'm just going to show off for a second if I could. So if he does
more
rough, I know it's more of it. 1,200 jobs a year.
Yep.
10 years ago. So that would have been 12,000. Am I math right?
Very good.
12,000. And he's gone out once in 12,000 plus or minus.
Plus or minus.
Well, we'll have to keep tabs on that and send you out again pretty soon here.
The clock is ticking, right?
Yeah.
So, but Dave, you said we rely on the database for everything. I think we do at a certain level, but at another level of estimating, we rely more on maybe proposals or specific bids. Maybe, so let's walk through the process just quickly, but somebody comes in and says, I've got this new project and let's use a screen porch and a kitchen as an example. And at a fairly preliminary level, you're going to estimate that with what tools or input from others.
So we have a multi-area Excel spreadsheet that we can just put little X's in the box for a kitchen, for an addition, bathroom, whatever it is, and it'll throw a range of 15% on either side of the better number.
But as that project matures, then you're going to get into specific line items, and then we're going to get a proposal from a plumber, and an electrician, and a heating and cooling guy, and a whatever, mason, and a tile setter, and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, the developers and or the designers will get that information. Once they get that back to me, then if they don't have time to do it, I'll take care of it. I'll put their quote in and delete all the line items that pertain to that specific subcontractor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's just when people hear, my God, how does he do 12,000 estimates in a 10-year period?
That was good, Bill.
How about that? I mean, it's a lot of work. But you specifically focus on estimating. You do not gather sub-proposals. You do not visit the site. You are not interacting with subcontractors. You are not pricing faucets from Ferguson, those sorts of things.
Others do all the walkthroughs and hand-holding, take the client to Ferguson's or wherever they need to take them. We'll have our showroom where the client can come in here and pick everything. And so I don't have to worry about any of that.
Right. You just got to put it.
I just have to estimate.
You just put a number
on it, and I have to be confident that number is good,
is accurate,
and I have to, tell the developers, hey, this number is good. It's gotten a lot better, especially with the relationship between me and developers over the years. Where at one point, you sure this is how much it is? I'm like, yeah. I mean, that's how much it is, and then we can adjust it if we need to, certain ways. But it has to be at the correct GP percent, and I have to have the correct markups. If you delete something out of the estimate, it's got to be replaced with something. If it would, if you delete a wood beam and you want to put a steel beam in, we got to put that back in. So
I think along those lines, exactly what you're talking about is a big reason I think Bill and I and a lot of us feel like you're an incredible, I want to say secret weapon, but an important team member, because you do bring that objective view on the project, whereas traditionally a salesperson, project developer in our world, reality is they want to sell the job, and budget's usually a push, and they're might want to cut a little bit here and there. I've been in roles where I've done my own estimates, and it's easy to say, I'll just give the painting away for free. I'll build those niches in the shower wall for free. In production, a lot of times they want to add cost, typically. So having an objective third party, a lot of remodelers that I talk to, the estimating role is getting all of or most of the pricing together. They're getting the sub bids, they're walking the job, and as I thought about this before this podcast, I can see that if I started a remodeling company and got to a size or a stage where I wanted some help, because doing estimate's hard.
Oh, yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's not fun, typically. No offense.
That's kind of the commercial way of doing it. That's how they do it in the commercial.
And if I'm an owner, I need somebody to take that off my plate, and I can see that. But I think as your business grows, for those listening in or watching, because we are on YouTube. But as your business grows, I think really considering that, Bill, don't you think?
Just how you approach that role and how involved they are with the gathering as opposed to the estimating of it. Because, I mean, you do a lot of estimating, but as Bruce sort of started, you do a lot of other stuff too, and that's maintaining the database so that it's accurate. You're doing a lot of after the fact, our quarterly sort of check-ins with estimated versus actual.
Right.
You're looking at a bunch of different cost codes. You're looking at how are we performing on this scope of work versus that scope of work.
Versus
you're looking
this city and whatever.
Geographic area, people, all of that sort of stuff to turn the dial and fine-tune the system to be as accurate as it can be.
Right.
I mean, I want to think, didn't we ran into a situation, now this has been a couple of years ago now, where we were underestimating some of the logistics of startup, and you discovered that piece of the puzzle, is my recollection of that. Do you have any recollection? You can remember.
I'm trying to
Please speak into the microphone.
I'm trying to think of.
But my recollection was there was a cost code that we could not figure out. And maybe it was because it was an assembly of a bunch of different scopes of work or something. And that what it turned out to be was that, guys were walking from where they were working to the truck. And I think it was specifically urban environments, maybe it was what
we did
what
get
it
into
was.
that.
Yeah. I mean, I add everything possible. I try to add everything possible. So startup packages and material takeoffs and things like that. We have items in there to cover that. But then the most recent thing that I had to add was the kind of the DC factor or the condo factor. So I have a difficult access line item that adds however many man hours to a project, especially if it's a condo on the 10th floor in Ellicott City or wherever, Crystal City. If I know it's a condo, I'm adding a little bit additional to it. And I look at those sheets you were talking about where you can look at estimated versus actual, and I see condos are now doing okay.
Right.
They're a little bit above, under
where we
budget.
want them to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned, Bill, the sort of quarterly, which ties into this, the quarterly reviews, and maybe you can talk, Dave, just a little bit to share with listeners and watchers, wink, wink, of what that process is.
So I do two things. I use kind of the 30,000-foot view spreadsheet where it's connected to our CRM and pulls all the data from Timberline, and then I can slice it up. So I can select Adrian and I can select additions, and it'll tell me how good Adrian is doing with additions. Same thing, Dave Vogue, or I can add him in there and see how he does on kitchens. Overall, everybody's doing pretty good, really, so I don't have any complaints there. And then we go to a little more intense view of things, and we got this what's called a master cost variance report, and I can look at each cost code during a certain period of time per developer, per designer, however I need to.
Or aggregate it all together.
Which is what we do for our quarterly meetings. But, it's that one, I can't put a slicer on it like I did on the pivot table.
So if I'm watching or listening, I switched it around there.
Clever.
If I'm watching, my head exploded just now because that's
a lot.
To me, and I mean this respectfully, that's sort of the whatever. That's the golden level, the platinum level, where I'd love to be as a listener, where I can slice and dice by person, by project type, by region, understand, access is the issue, right? But if I'm listening and I'm sort of like, I'm not quite there yet, I think one lesson learned is, at least what we do, is quarterly call a timeout, look at how your jobs are coming in on the GP, on the costing versus estimated. Even if it's the whole job, that job we lost our butt on, or this job we made extra money on. And then the next phase is, if you're not already doing this, is trying to figure out, well, where and specifically in the job did you make or lose money? Was it in labor, sub, material? And then you start to have to, that's where you get into cost coding. Is that fair to say? Breaking down. So when you do an estimate, you're breaking it down by labor, sub, material, and we call it other, like permit, dump fees, those kind of things, carpenter bonuses. But even then once you get to that phase, the next phase is then you want to start to look at labor, but break it down. And we have, 5 cost codes?
Well, right, for labor,
For labor, for instance.
Yeah.
So then we can see, so when the estimate's done, it breaks down within those, like how much is demo hall versus framing.
Right. So we can look at, the labor for framing, and if it's over budget and we see material is under budget, something's going over here on labor.
Right.
Now, if they're equal, if they're both over budget the same, then somebody's doing something twice.
Right.
Yeah.
And then once the estimate is broken down by those cost codes, if you're already doing that, great. If you're not, something to think about. You obviously need then your time cards. If you have in-house labor, need to have those cost codes that align equally, so that when you get reports, you can see estimated in each of those versus actual sub invoices. I'm sorry, we code that way.
Yep.
So
yeah, sometimes everybody throws it in 050, towards the end of a project, and we can sort of see what happened.
Define 050.
One of our cost codes, it's for painting and tile work.
But a lot of, like you're saying, stuff at the end of the job gets stuck in there. So you can the data has to be good in order to get a good interpretation out of it. Yeah. So you got to be clean about that. Dave, you sit at a pretty unique spot, I think. You see a lot of projects. You see a lot of costing. Everybody's thinking about costs nowadays, like they seem to be going up in many areas. If you're the counsel here for how people ought to be thinking about estimating, is there something you're seeing that, you're keeping an eye on in terms of either costs going up more or potentially even stabilizing or going down?
Well, things that are going down are lumber. So framing lumber has gone down over the last 4 months or so, about 25%.
Significant.
So I'm going to sit with, Neil and kind of go over, hey, how much do we want to lower the materials for framing lumber and for decking and so on. The thing that went up a little bit would be steel. So I go onto a Metals Depot website, and I'll periodically, maybe a couple times a month, look at their steel prices and compare it to what we have, and I'll add a little bit, if it's warranted. But I think lumber is coming down. Sheet goods is sort of hovering about the same, maybe a little bit higher, if anything. From the report we get.
Meaning
from our
like
distributor.
plywood, sheathing,
right?
that
Plywood,
kind of stuff,
right?
Underlayment,
half-inch
whatever.
plywood, three-quarter,
that sort of thing. And then maybe something you don't see as much of in the individual, but Allie, who's been on the show before too, sends out something periodically, usually once a month, order of magnitude, about some of the vendors we work with. And we're seeing plumbing prices, plumbing supply prices, faucets, fittings, tubs, toilets, those sorts of things, increasing at the beginning of the year. It's not that unusual, but we're seeing 5 to 10% increases there as well. Appliances, you mentioned. Those sorts of things. And then the other thing, I think that, again, it's kind of hidden a little bit because we get a proposal for this work, are some of the trades. I think about what the cost we spend on electrical for a kitchen 5 years ago versus today. Right. I bet it's double.
Oh, easily. Well, larger kitchen, I'm seeing $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 for electric on kitchens easily.
Yeah. For a medium kitchen.
Right. I'll see a quote for an addition, a kitchen and a bath, the electrician's $40,000. It's like, wow. I mean, it's never been like
and
that.
as you all know, but for a key step in our process, before we give a fixed price contract, we have trade walkthroughs where those subcontractors, trade specialists are coming through the house, seeing it, bringing up any issues or concerns or advice, but also giving us a fixed price for their work, which is a key step as opposed. So earlier you mentioned you had pricing in our estimating system, which we use ProEst as that technology tool. But I think you have holders in there for a kitchen and what a typical plumber would cost, or a typical electrician.
Right. So when I pull an estimating template into an estimate, and I go through it and I get to the electric, I can kind of look at the drawings. I'm not an electrician, but I know enough, and I'll plug in how many outlets we need, how many recessed lights, and it adds up.
Right.
So it starts out at about 7,500 and goes from there.
But that gives us a starting point, right? But then that trade walk is critical. So I don't want folks to think we just use sort of what's in the ProEst estimating system and go with it. It's really important for us to have those trade walks.
Dave, also in the way of advice, in addition to line items to frame a wall or install a door, whatever it might be, what would you encourage people to think about that's maybe outside of that? Like, I'll give you an example, punch, to include a line. Are there other things like that people ought to be thinking beyond just specific task-related line items?
Well, what I mentioned earlier, startup and material takeoff, but there's also dust protection. We do a lot of dust protection on our jobs, and that could be a pretty big chunk of money. And then, clean up afterwards. The difficult access, and, if we have a hard time accessing a particular building. So those are basically the extras that are added in there.
We also, in addition, as you know, Dave, we also have made a decision as a company to include in the job cost for the Jones job, design, project management, fees. Maybe you can just touch on that.
So the project support fees? Yeah. So we add project support fees to cover what you were saying, and they change depending on what markup tier this particular project is. And so that covers that.
And so you may not want to do that, or you may want to do that, but that's how we do it.
Do you handle it in markup, or do you handle it as a line item?
Right.
But I think it's important not to lose track of those, layout, difficult site, access adjustment, punch out work, coordination with subcontractors or inspections, or, that adds an hour or 2 hours every single time one of those things happen. And I think when somebody's in a situation where maybe their actual is not where they'd like it to be relative to the estimated, some of it might not be that you're not performing the work as you've estimated. It may be you're not thinking about all of these other things that over a course of 3 months could add up to be 2-3 weeks worth of additional labor on a project.
Excellent point, Bill. Excellent. I remember we've always said carpenters make the worst estimators, and I say that respectfully, but it's because they're typically thinking, I can hang that door in 4 hours, and they're not thinking about and I'm like that with my wife when I do projects around the house. How long is that going to take? 10 minutes. And I'm thinking, it might be more than 10 minutes, but you know what I mean? Just the task, not the setup. I got to get the ladder, my tools.
We need to put you in wife sales training, man. 10 minutes, you go to do that.
That's pretty
good. Are you really sure you want to take
good.
that on?
That's good.
Gosh, do you realize?
Hanging that picture is a huge job.
Let me fire up Excel, because there's got to be 3,000 line items in that. Are you sure?
Thank you. That was good enough for me. I think
okay. I didn't know it was that big a deal. Let's put that on the 2027 to-do list.
That's pretty good. That's a good tie-in, actually, and this was your original idea, which I thought was fabulous. Another thing that I think is interesting with estimating that we do for in-house labor, if you have in-house labor, is the cost of price, the wage of excellent carpenters, craftspeople is probably, I think most of us would agree, not going to go down.
It should only go up.
Yep. And maybe you could share, because that was yours.
Yeah. So, So as you know, we have a labor component, right? So we have an hourly wage associated with that. And what we used to do is, every year, 18 months, 2 years sometimes, it would be like, we ought to make an adjustment to that. And the adjustment would be fairly significant because it had been a little while. And what we decided to do was the tick tock and make it 50 cents every 6 months. And so that it was a small increment. Nobody cared. It was 50 cents an hour to that. In the estimating system, that doesn't necessarily mean a guy got paid any differently, but we were estimating that way, and it kept us current with the environment for, it's a competitive environment. Craftsmen are precious and need to be paid accordingly. And we didn't want to fall out of that, but we didn't want it not to be dealt with in the estimate. And I think we've done that long enough where we can now slow it down a little bit because we're in a position where we can still pay a competitive wage that's already baked into the estimating system. And we can continue to increase it, but maybe that increase can slow down a little bit.
Yeah. It was a great idea.
Yeah, I think it started at when we started doing the increments, the 50-cent increments, started at $32.50. And now we're up to $36.
And that's in our estimating system,
And,
right. Already said. So it might be a carpenter gets a wage increase once a year, but we're doing it more internally.
Right.
I think another thing because we're running out a little bit of time, but to me at least, another key that I consider partly in our estimating process is because Dave doesn't go out and see the jobs, which means by definition, it would be in our world, the project developer or salesperson and the designer have really only met with the client and seen the job, is that the project manager gets assigned well before it goes to contract.
Right.
So they get to see the job. They're part of that trade walkthrough that I mentioned earlier. And then that project manager gets to review and approve the full project package and estimate. They get it typically 48 business hours before it's presented, sometimes even more than that. But I think that's a critical step because they're going to be looking at the project from a different perspective than others sometimes. But also I think it's critical, not just for the estimate, but the overall job success, because the project manager is the one who is the lead sort of person on the project once it's sold. And it's only fair to give them a chance to talk about it. And there are issues sometimes. A lot of people, when I bring this up, say, "Oh, isn't there conflict?" Or
and there is, but what we can usually say is the estimate is dialed in enough that it can't just be, I feel like I need more money. Like, why? And maybe we've missed an access adjustment or something like that. Or, we have 75 linear feet of wall and you need to build it for that amount because Dave spends an enormous amount of time making sure that that's accurate and we can fall back on that. And it usually gets negotiated out in some way that everybody's happy with. But then Dave, you also look at it before.
Yeah, I'll look at it
with a final after the project manager's gone through it.
Kind of funny because the developers always come to me, well, the project manager looked at it already. It's like, yeah, but I need to look at it
for different things.
And the funny thing is, I'll find something that we both miss.
Yeah.
Either something to take out of it or something to add back into it. So it works to look at a project.
Oh, it does. Absolutely.
With 3 sets of eyes.
Absolutely. Everybody needs an editor.
Yeah.
You may be the world's greatest writer. You need an editor. You need somebody looking over your shoulder.
And the average job size, just for context, in our design build world is 250,000. It's
neighborhood. Yep.
So on our Fred division, which this is more about the case design build side of our business, but on the Fred division, the average job size is about $20,000. And in that case, we'd love to have an editor. We'd love to have a couple of people look at the estimates, but it's just not realistic at that job size. So I just mentioned that if your job size is more in that smaller size, that's great. It's just in that case, the same person who estimates it, sells it, and is also the project manager in our Fred division.
Yep. And project developers jump in and out of estimates as well.
Yeah.
But it's mainly just to tune something up or adjust a number here or there. We really rely on Dave to get that foundation set that we just have to make minor tweaks on.
Right.
Dave, you're an amazing person and an amazing estimator.
And a pretty good estimator, too.
And an okay
at estimating.
Anything you'd want to share in wrapping up, or a couple key insights, since this is what you do and a lot of folks listening want to get better at estimating?
You got to like or love what you do. I love estimating. And if that's what you're going to do, if you're not the project developer, you're not a designer, and you want to go into estimating, enjoying it, looking at a project, trying to determine, how much walls are coming out, how much dust protection I need. I'll spend the first 40 minutes or so looking at the drawing to determine, okay, I know I'm going to need these things, and I might add those things in right away without any quantities. So just attention to detail, understanding how a house is put together, from start to finish, starting with, or how an addition, let's say, demo and dust protections and all that going in the correct order. And then just loving what you do.
Yeah.
And having
also
a certain personality type, maybe.
Well, yeah.
It's very meticulous and organized.
But you also have to believe in the numbers. So if you don't believe in the numbers, and we had a lot of that back, especially if a new project developer comes on and says, I can't sell this kitchen for $120,000. That's how much it is. So you have to sell it for $120,000.
Oh, yeah. But we can prove it, right?
Right.
We have data that shows that if you do this, you'll get a good result. And again, we talked about this before. The best indicator of client experience is GP percent. That means the job went well, that we didn't have to redo things, that there weren't delays, that we did what we were supposed to do in the way we were supposed to do it. And it's a great indicator, and we're on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, last year we were a little over 2% under budget.
Yeah.
So
which is
almost every year
in a world where, costs are unpredictable, shall we say.
Any final thoughts, Bill, on the topic?
Well, I think we could go on and on and on and on, but it's one of those things that's so important to the business to take, you need the contract signed today, but if you need that extra 24 hours to dot some I's, cross some T's, make sure somebody else looks at it, double check a sub number, a proposal, it's just time well spent, and you'll have a happier client as a result.
Fabulous. Thank you again, Dave.
Thank you.
Email us, dbcentral@casedesign.com. Listen to us on the podcast or watch us on YouTube.
Why not?
Have a great day.
Thank you.